Hey, ¿qué pasa, Calexico? Welcome back to the podcast. Before we begin, like always, I want to thank my sponsors. I want to thank my anchor sponsors, Sergio Armenta and Jake. Thank you guys for sponsoring the podcast. I really appreciate it. And if you want to become a sponsor, make sure you check out the link on my Instagram and my bio. I also want to thank Patty Chow and Golden Dragon for giving me a space to record today's episode. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the space. And just a reminder, today's episode is not an endorsement. It's just a way for you, the listener, to get to know the candidate, and hopefully, it'll help you make a decision come election day. So, today's guest is currently on the board of directors for the IID for Division 2. He's also a candidate because his term ends in December of this year. Today's guest is Mr. Bruce Kuhn. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Normally, when I have a guest, I let them, tell us a little bit about themselves. So, I know you have a long history here in the Valley. So, can you just give us a short version of things that you've done? I know you were a police officer for a while. You've served in a lot of boards here, including the IID, including the food bank. So, can you tell us a little bit, about your history here in the Valley?
Well, born and raised here, born in Brawley, went through elementary school there, kindergarten through 6th. Then my dad's office was down here, and he was doing quite a bit of work in the South End, so we moved to El Centro when I was 12. Oddly enough, that is District 2. So, been there about 52 years.
In El Centro?
Living in El Centro in District 2. Whether even when I moved out of the house, I was still in District 2. When my wife and I bought our first house, it was in District 2. Now we own multiple rentals, and every single one of those are in District 2.
So, yeah, you had a long history here in District 2.
Yes.
You've served on the IID for quite some time. I think your first term was back in, was it 96?
Yes.
What made you decide to run back then?
Well, at that time there was an attempt to make the Imperial County go to potable water. They were going to pipe the entire system, and it was going to cost in the hundreds of millions of dollars to do it, and that would have put us in the drinking water or potable water business, and that meant you would have to run pipes down along our right-of-ways or some way get that to every house in the unincorporated areas. The cities, and it's important you understand this, the cities have their own, so they weren't going to be paying for it.
Mm-hmm.
None of the incorporated cities would be paying for it. Just those that it was going to serve in the county. It was going to cost, if they did it, and they were going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't say they were contemplating doing it, and then the wheels were being turned, greased for lack of a better term, within the district to go forward with it. Only those that is served in the county would have to pay for it. And I did the math back then, and it would have cost per month about $1,200 for every single household in the county.
Wow. Because,
again, the incorporated cities didn't have to pay for it.
Yeah.
It would have been cost prohibitive. I talked to some of the board members, and one of them told me that, well, they can pay it or they can move to town. And I said, you can't do that to those folks out there. I said, I could stay out there and you could stay out there, but there are people out there that could ill afford that, and they would have to move to town. Those old farmhouses that were bought up when, as people moved, passed away, whatever, others bought the land, they had houses on, employees lived there. All of those people would be forced to move to town. There just weren't very many people out there that could afford, in 1996, a $1,200 a month water bill.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, especially like living in those houses that probably were paid off, and was people that were, living paycheck to paycheck. And
well, exactly. And those are the ones that I was concerned about. There were substantially more that couldn't afford it than could. And then if they moved to town and didn't, then the burden would have fallen on those who did try to stay. Now, how are they going to pay for that? Because again, if it would have gone from 12 to, $2,500 a month.
Yeah. So that was one of the biggest reasons why you.
That is the reason I ran.
Oh, really? Coming back to, the present. I remember we had scheduled to meet, and then you decided to not run. Can you tell us a little bit about what made you kind of like say, you know what, I don't want to go through it again?
Well, of course, I don't relish, campaigning, and I've done it about 6 times. And there were other reasons that I felt perhaps it was time. However, after I announced I wouldn't, then there was a candidate coming before our board and saying some things that perhaps didn't sound bad to the candidate saying them, but I can tell you, having been on this board for 15 years, he was saying things that were inherently dangerous politically for us, because some of the things he was saying is exactly what some of our adversaries out there would like to see happen. And I was becoming alarmed. Then I would see things on Facebook that made me even more alarmed. It's one thing to say you want to do something and you want to fight for water, you want to fight for low power. It's another to say things that, again, our adversaries want to hear. And there are things that we have done, there are things that we have in place that you just cannot come in and turn them upside down and think it's going to be for the better, because it will not. If I may, the 2003 transfer is the biggest one. He keeps saying there's billions of gallons of water. Well, yeah, there are. But here we deal in acre feet. We don't deal in gallons. People in town deal in gallons, but out in the farm community, we don't. It's called acre feet. His billions of gallons of water are 200,000 acre feet. I mean, 200,000 acre feet is enough to cover 200 acres. I'm sorry, 200,000 acre feet is enough to cover 200,000 acres, 1 foot high.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but is there a surplus of water right now?
That's another misnomer that one of our candidates keeps harping on, that, water's for Imperial County. It should stay here. Well, by the law of the river, if we don't use it, it goes to Metropolitan Water District. And during the campaign the debate at IVC, I was quoted as saying it goes to Coachella and Mexicali. The reporter got it wrong. I said, if we don't use it, it stays in the system and it goes to Metropolitan Water District. They get it for free. If we don't use it, and this has been going on since 1928. If we don't use our apportionment, it goes to Metropolitan. And for someone to come in here and say our water for Imperial Valley, when we are in one of the most severe droughts on the Colorado River Basin, and you're going to tell people that need it or want it, you're going to thumb your nose at them and say, we're going to open up new ground and we're going to use it. I can't imagine anything more detrimental when the federal government gets wind of something like that, that if you want to bring the force of the federal government to bear upon you, keep doing that. Keep saying that. Keep saying that. And then when you get on, try to do it. Coachella tried this just about 3 years ago. They were going to open up new ground and they were going to take more water. We at the IID said, no, we will not agree to that because we're in a drought. If you're going to use more water now, it's going to really look bad. And we will not agree to it. So they didn't. Now, I can tell you that if you pull that here, as one of my opponents is saying, you're going to bring the wrath of the entire federal government and 7 basin states to bear upon us. Now, when you talk about 7 basin states, you're talking about 14 U.S. senators. They are not going to stand idly by and allow that to happen. And we would be literally eviscerated if we did such a draconian thing. It just cannot do that. Yeah. And this is why I'm in, because this is the message that's going out. And do I want water here? Of course I want water here. Let's go back to the transfer 2003.
Is that the one where
with San Diego?
Were you voted yes on that one, and you got a little bit of backlash?
Actually, the first time it came to our board, I voted no. And it was I had 2 yes, 2 no, and I voted no. The next time it came, we had got changes and concessions from them. I was president of the board, so I voted last. I had the same 2 no's and I had the same 2 yeses. So, unfortunately or fortunately, I was a swing vote. So, as the person that ran against me in 2004 said, that was my baby, it was my vote, I did it, it was all my fault. Okay, all my fault, it passed, it's done, the water's moving. We are now able to farm the same amount of ground with less water, because with the money that the transfer brings in, we have been paying our farmers to conserve water, and they've been buying the infrastructure, pipes, sprinklers, drip, so that they can farm the same amount of ground with less water. And that transfer is not $125 million one-time payment. It's $125 million a year. The water that is used in ag would be about $40,000 an acre foot, but for the transfer, it's $20 an acre foot. If you take 20, which they're paying, add another 20, that's 100% of the entire water department budget that is being paid for annually by that transfer. So when I hear it's a bad thing, it's a horrible thing, okay, then come in here and stop it like you say you're going to, and then put a $56 million burden on the backs of our farmers, because their water will go to $40 an acre foot, because there will not be any money to offset it. Yeah. And that's what's happening.
So yeah, and at the beginning you got a little bit of backlash, but eventually it made sense.
Well, I will say this. The transfer with San Diego, was it a perfect document? No. Was it a lot better than the federal government tried to shove on us? Yes, it is. I mean, it was really one-sided. I became the lead negotiator. Now, even with all its warts, the transfer is substantially better than what they wanted us to accept. And it brings in $125 million annually, and it keeps the cost of ag water down by 100% now. And if that were, first things first, there's a multitude of dangers. If you undo it, you're gonna face the wrath of 7 basin states, our own included, by the way, and the federal government. And there's a drought. And that thing serves 40 million people. Go ahead. Get that on a ballot and see who wins.
Yeah, it's crazy how much politics is involved in water. Like, especially us. Like, I guess we don't really see, we take it for granted that we get, we have all this water that's coming from Colorado, but we don't see all the places it passes through that can, affect.
Well, it starts in the upper basins. Yeah, I mean, it starts, with the Little Colorado, the Dirty Devil. These are rivers, and they come into and they form there are others, but they form the mighty Colorado as we know it, and we get it, and it ends at Sea of Cortez.
Going back to all these times you served, all this time you've been involved in the IID. One of your candidates is fairly young. And all the candidates are really, well capable and educated and smart. But there's times where I guess the thing where you have on them is the experience.
Correct.
There's a lot of issues that you've been dealing with since you've been on the board. That do you feel that having somebody come in new would not benefit the board or the IID or the county in itself?
Well, for the reason I've just stated, you can't. If another candidate, any of the other three, got on this board, got on the IID board, could not, and I repeat, could not stop that transfer. Not going to happen. And if they did, they're going to put a $56 million burden on the ag users in Imperial County. Why would you do that? And if you did that, you would start basically World War III of the water wars on that Colorado River. Why would you do that? It's asinine. It doesn't make any sense. We went through that thing for a long time to get it approved, and it was changed multiple times. And to go around, according to one, he's gone up to water meetings all up and down the river. I can't imagine he was met with glee when if he said he was going to shut that transfer off in the middle of a drought. I mean, it's foolish. It's talk that hurts. It's talk that water marketers want to hear. And, we had a situation in the Abatti Valley where a private company came in and bought literally tens of thousands of acres and then sold it to Metropolitan. Mm-hmm. I don't know whether you've been to Blythe lately, but there are empty stores.
It's a ghost town.
Well, I'm not going to say it's a ghost town, but there are empty stores. There are businesses that have closed. You want to cause adversity? Let that happen here. And we have a company that has invested heavily in ground here. And in an interview with the general manager of Metropolitan, he said he's not interested in the land that they own here in Imperial County unless they get it to 50,000 acres. Now, that's not me. That's the general manager of Metropolitan that said that. If someone's worried about the transfer, better really be worried about that, because that's the same company that bought the ground in Blythe, in the Abatti Valley. That is your threat. Go ahead. Let the water marketers take over. And if you think the IID did something bad, watch what they did. Go to Blythe. Look what they've done.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you drive through there when you're on your way to Vegas. So.
Well, not me, but you maybe.
Yeah.
I call it lost wages.
Lost wages, yeah, pretty much. You've because of your personal business, you've worked with I guess you can call it like the blue collar employees here in the valley, construction workers and whatnot.
I had a company that was an agricultural land leveling company. Had it for 36 years. Before that, I actually worked for other people who were in the agricultural land leveling business also. I was in Saudi Arabia twice, leveling ground for the Al Hassa Irrigation District when I was a whopping 28 years old.
How do you feel that's made you aware of your constituents, the people that would be affected if something
Well, because I worked for farmers, agriculture, and I know the problems they have, and I know the issues that they faced. My dad owned 1,000 acres at one time, and farmed on the west side of the valley. I come from an ag background. I know what water's about. I know that water is important. I know that it is absolutely the lifeblood of Imperial County. I also know that in politics, we had people that wanted to grab it. And back to that transfer, the federal government took 200,000 acres just to show us what they could do if we didn't make that deal. The same amount that we ended up doing for San Diego. Now, we went to court and we got that back, but they did that, and that was their first salvo across the bow of the IID. If you don't do this, watch what we will do to you.
Mm-hmm. Going back to experience, do you feel that it's like, say I would run this next next election season, do you feel that somebody that's new to all this business can handle the amount of pressure that, because I mean, like, you're talking about federal government, you're talking about private companies, you're talking about
state government.
Say, like, you feel somebody that's fresh off, I don't know, the street can handle the pressure of trying to maybe even get bought by a company, like, say, hey, you know, help us out with this, and we'll help you with some, I don't know, whatever. Like, the pressure of dealing with, you know, powerful people, is it something that any normal everyday person can, you know?
No, they cannot. Well, yes, they can, but they can be made a fool too. Mm-hmm. Look, I have personally testified in Washington, D.C. in a congressional meeting, not of the whole Congress, but with congressmen on issues with the water, with the Assistant Secretary of the Interior in the room. And he had an agenda, and it wasn't in our best interest. So, you know, having spent many, many hours in a witness booth in courts, I thought, okay, you know, I'll let him go and I'll let him hang himself, and I'm coming after him. And he did, and I did, and made him look bad, really bad. In fact, I don't know if you've ever stared at something you're trying to heat up in the microwave for about 10 minutes, but he had two congressmen chewing on him for 10 minutes saying, why, if they're not supposed to tell people, why is it that Mr. Kuhn said you're telling people? What makes you better than the irrigation district, and i.e. Bruce Kuhn? And he couldn't answer it. And they chewed on that man. And when it was over, walked by him, stuck my hand out to shake it, and he drew his hand back. Obviously not a happy camper. Mm-hmm.
You were endorsed by the union, IBEW.
Both of them, IBEW, and the San Diego and Imperial County Labor Council also, and the Carpenters Union endorsed me. 2-3 days ago? Yes.
So what is it? What do you think it says about you when, you know, the workers of the IID, the employees of the IID are you know, endorsing you, and what does it say towards you standing up for?
It says that I have the experience to work with labor simultaneously while working with management, and the employees of the IID, I can't say all of them,
yeah,
but most of them trust me. Mm-hmm. And I have gone to bat, literally gone to bat, to save the jobs of some of them that were absolutely going to be terminated, and I didn't feel that there was a terminable offense, and I have literally gone to the mat to save their jobs, and they know I will. And the others that are out there, they know I will go to the mat to save their jobs. If I consider it a bum beef, or if I read it. When we get these terminations, they come to the board. I read those. I read every page of them, and they mean something to me. If it's bona fide, I have agreed to termination. If I don't, and I can show the rest of the board that, wait a minute, there's been a mistake made here, I have shown that to them too. And I have literally saved people's jobs out there. And I will continue to do that.
One of the big issues that's, going on the ID is the AB 854. Can you tell us a little bit about it in a layman's term, just in case?
It came to us. It was a bill sponsored by Chad Mays out of La Quinta, and it was to give 6 board positions to Riverside County residents, which means they would have 6 and we would have 5. Now, there's an old saying, a grandfather was working in a blacksmith shop and he had a red hot horseshoe, and his grandson picked it up and dropped it, and he said, well, that was hot, wasn't it, son? He said, no, Grandpa, it just doesn't take me all day to look at a hot horseshoe. Okay, so this, pretty obvious. If they had 6 and we had 5, that puts them in charge of our board. The Coachella Valley Water District is over there. They, on the law of the river, they're behind us. Well, that would put them in charge of us, and I just can't imagine that would have been in our best interest. Yeah. I mean, now they're serving the people that put them in office, not us. Mm-hmm. And on the priorities, they're lower than us. So if you have 6, you can change things.
Yeah, for sure.
That was such a game changer, such a huge threat, not only to our power users, but our water users also. I mean, it would have been horrible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, because one of the things that I guess all the candidates are running on is keeping rates low.
Yes.
And like we've been talking about, you've been, fighting for, to keep these rates low.
Our rates are about 25 to 30% lower than just about any place in California. I can tell you that I was in La Quinta at our offices. There was a church, they were going to build a big church. They had 2 lots. They were going to build the church on a lot that was in Edison's service area, and the parking lot was going to be in ours. And I looked at that and I said, do you realize you're going to have all these air conditioners and other things going on in the church, and it's going to be in Edison? Yeah. Right, and you're going to have some street lights and some other things. The parking lot going to be an hour. Yeah. Do you realize that our rates are about 25 to 30% lower than theirs? You need to turn that thing. They went back to their architect and said, hey, he's right. And they built that church with the parking lot in Edison and the building an hour.
Yeah, it's a smart thing.
Well, because our rates are 25 to 30% less.
Yeah. And I think that's something that we take for granted here, where, in the summers we might pay, but we live in a desert. And
the bills are high in the summer, but if you use that same amount of electricity that you're paying for here to run those air conditioners, if you did it up there, whatever you think is high now, just add about 30% to that. That's what other people in the rest of the state are paying.
Yeah, and even in Coachella, that street where you,
I think it's Madison.
Yeah,
the Mason-Dixon line.
Yeah.
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but did you, when it came to the Abatti lawsuit, did you recuse yourself from?
I did recuse myself. If you look at politics and history, there have been several people who have had conflicts of interest, and people with conflicts of interest typically get fined, and some of them go to jail.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel I had any recourse but to recuse myself. Mike Abatti and I are friends. I rented equipment from him. He rented equipment from me. I leveled fields for him. I could not vote on something that Mike Abatti had brought forward. I had a conflict of interest. It's been 2 years since we've done any business. I've been assured by my legal people that a conflict no longer applies. But on that particular case, because I recused myself, I have to continue to recuse myself. But any new things that come up, I do not have to recuse myself.
Okay. So it was important for you just so that there was no if.
I didn't want anything to look like it was improper, no improprieties. And I was advised by legal that I would have. So, not being a lawyer, I went with it.
Yeah. There's a trial this Tuesday, and I guess it's next Tuesday, where also kind of involves the lawsuit that you put on the IID because of the ORMAT issue.
That's Mike Abatti's.
That's part of the...
That while it's a new issue, but it's a new issue tied to the old one, therefore, I recuse myself.
Okay, I see. Yeah, and something that I keep not asking, but like thinking about is the experience thing, because there's places and where like some people might argue where people keep saying the experience, but I feel that in this case, me personally, I feel that just the fact that you've been dealing with the big issues that the IAD is dealing with right now. I just feel that this is something that I would say, yeah, you do have on the other candidates. And no, go ahead.
Well, given the remarks that I've seen on Facebook, given the remarks that have been said by other candidates, opponents at our meetings, it gives me cause to believe that inexperience is speaking. And it's dangerous, politically dangerous, and the things that have been said that are wanted to be done cannot be done. Mm. And if the candidate saying that had a magic wand and could make it happen, they better not turn loose of the wand, because they're going to start World War III of the water wars. Mm. And we just cannot do that. Yeah. There's a drought going on. You cannot thumb your nose at people and tell them, tough, we're going to open up new ground and use it all. Mm. That is, to me, one of the dumbest statements you can say to the water world, because you're thumbing your nose at 40 million people. Go ahead, cowboy. Make their day.
Yeah. Another issue that's big here in the Imperial Valley is...
if I may, and I hate to interrupt you, but you were talking about experience. And I had a true life story. I was in Fort Knox, Kentucky, going through basic training. And we had just what they call fallout. Our training was over. We were going to go to the showers, clean up, go to the chow line for dinner, so we could actually walk and talk to each other. There was a sergeant major walking down the sidewalk. There was a second lieutenant walking down the sidewalk towards each other. This sergeant major was a Korean War combat wounded veteran. He was a Vietnam combat wounded veteran. This second lieutenant, the only difference between their grades is one. This Sergeant Major Young had about 30 years in. Again, Korean War, wounded, Purple Heart. Vietnam War, wounded, Purple Heart. Second Lieutenant Chidley walking by, and walked past him. This lieutenant had graduated college, went to ROTC, Reserve Officer Candidate training. Upon graduation, he's got a college degree, and he's a second lieutenant. Okay, that's fine. He's a second lieutenant in charge of men with no experience. His first deployment was in our training brigade, in our company. He was our XO. Had never been in combat, had never led men. And he turned around and said, "Soldier, did you not see this bar on my uniform?" And the old sergeant major turned around. "No, I didn't." He said, "Well, you will salute me or else." And 2 wars, 2 Purple Hearts, leading men in combat. He turned around and he saluted the guy. And he said, "Well, here's your happy salute. Now shove it." Lieutenant Chidley sitting there, he'd blown his cheeks and crap. This guy had 30 years. He could retire anytime. He was still serving the country that he had been serving for 30 years in 2 wars and led men into combat. I submit to you, I would have followed Sergeant Major Young to the gates of hell to watch him put the fire out before I would have followed Lieutenant Chidley across the street to mail a letter. Experience matters. And if you have not fought the fight, if you have not been in the trenches as Sergeant Major Young had been, and you went to college, now you got they call it a butter bar, second lieutenant, and you're going to lead me into combat? Where is Sergeant Young? I'm going with him.
Yeah, so that's a good...
It's a true story, by the way.
Yeah. Let's see, I had something here that... Let's see. It's another thing that's another big issue here in the valley is the Salton Sea.
Yes.
How is the IID helping, or what is the IID doing to?
The issues with the Salton Sea are supposed to be taken care of by the state. Granted, they haven't done much. They're starting.
Mm-hmm.
In 2014, I believe, now Governor Newsom was lieutenant governor. We actually had him come down here. He's been at the Salton Sea. He knows what it looks like. And he knows that the state of California is contractually obligated from the transfer. The state of California is contractually obligated to take care of any damages arising from the transfer to San Diego. The state is contractually obligated. And they might not like it, but that was part of the transfer too.
Mm-hmm.
And so they are. Have they done everything we thought they were going to do? No. But do we keep pushing them? Yes. In 2014, I went to Sacramento because I was the only one on the board who had been here when all this other stuff happened, when the transfer was enacted. So I was asked to go up and testify on behalf of the IID, and I did. And when I was finished, I had some very high-dollar lawyers come down and shake my hand and said, "Man, you knocked it out of the park. They can't wiggle out of this. Well, they're not supposed to wiggle out if they're contractually obligated." This was before the State Water Resources Control Board. One of the members of the State Water Resources Control Board, after the meeting, came down back into the audience and came up and said, "I really, really enjoyed your presentation and your testimony here today. Would you set up a tour for me down there?" Well, of course we will. Now, I don't know that there was anybody else in that room that could, on their testimony, could have got one of the members of the State Water Resources Control Board to come down and come up and ask them if they would set up a tour for them. But I did. And when I did, the state started moving. So does experience matter? Of course it does, because I was drawing on what happened. I was here when it happened, and I testified to that. And it resonated with that board, and we started getting movement. So yeah, I've fought. There's a fight. You want to fight? I fought in Sacramento, in public. The room was packed. Had people coming down, shaking my hand, said, you knocked it out of the park. Had people when I got back here said, well, we know who was shining in that testimony. I said, well, my mom always said, if you tell the truth, you don't have to remember what you said.
Yeah, exactly. In terms of donations, is it important to you not to be involved or accept any contributions from people that might want to sell the water? Or
I will not accept money from people who want to sell our water. And one of the candidates running keeps insisting that there will be no more transfers. There are no transfers pending. There have been multiple resolutions passed by this board and boards going all the way back to 2003 that there will be no more transfers, and there haven't been any more transfers. And as long as I'm on that board, I will vote against any new transfer that may even remotely arise, because right now there's nothing pending. And there's no will of any of our board members, our sitting board members. There's no will to do another one, myself included. So to insinue that there's going to be another one is less than truthful, and it's less than honorable.
I think those are my questions. I don't know if you have anything that I didn't touch that you would like to.
Well, I would just like to reiterate that it came up in IVC also that back in 1996, when I first got elected to this board, the water transfer with San Diego, the negotiations had already started. It wasn't something I started, albeit I was one that put it together and finished it, and I was a swing vote that brought it to us. But when I got here in 1996, the current sitting board at that time, well, not 96, the former board had included our present perfected rights as water to San Diego, as part of that water to San Diego. In fact, not part of the water. On that water, that the whole 200,000 acre feet would have been out of our present perfected rights. For those who don't know what present perfected rights, those are our absolute rights. We had an elastic right up to 3.2, and we could use some of Arizona's until they started using it, and if there was extra water, we could use it. But 2.6, that is etched in stone. That is cast in concrete. When we get to 2.6, nobody can take any water from us without some sort of super legislation. And they had included 200,000 of that in that transfer. And when I found out about it, I said, no, not as long as I'm on this board, not as long as I am alive will I allow that to happen. And so I was taken San Diego by some of our folks, and we entered, a huge office, high rise. And they said, we need to talk about the present perfected right water as part of that we've been negotiating for the contract. Okay. What do you want to talk about? Well, San Diego really expects to have those, and because if we can't be cut back and they have part of our PPR, then they can't be cut back. And I said, so where are the people from San Diego? And they said, well, they're not here. I said, well, I would expect this from people from San Diego. I would not expect it from my own people. I said, now, if that's what you brought me up here for, take me home. Not going to happen. It will not happen. You go back and you tell whoever needs to in San Diego, it is not going to happen. And that was on a Friday. And I came home, and I knew that I blew it up. I knew I had blown the whole thing up. Friday night, all day Saturday, Saturday night, Sunday. Monday morning, I was driving down Heber Road. I was almost to Heber Beach, and my phone went off. And it was one of the folks that was up there, Rodney Smith. He said, "Are you sitting down?" "No, I'm driving." He said, "Well, you better pull over." I thought, oh, God. Okay, I guess I was being a hard-headed Swissman, and I blew this thing up. But I just couldn't see our present perfected water being negotiated to anyone. He said, "San Diego is called. They'll take out the PPRs. They'd rather have the deal without it than not to have it at all." Wow. That didn't go to the board. Mm-hmm. I didn't try to get permission from anyone else. I threw the fit up there. I'm the one that said come home. I'm the one that told them it was not going to happen. And they took it out. They took out our present and perfected water as part of the contract. I don't know how I can express how important that part was to get those out of there, our sacred rights. And I don't want to sound like a blowhard or a braggart, but I did that. Mm-hmm. I alone did that.
Yeah.
And we still have them.
Well, like I said, this is not an endorsement, but I'm sure that if people want to contact you, you'll be more than happy to answer any other questions that.
And I'll be more than happy to tell them about Sergeant Major Young.
You know what? I did have a question that somebody from Facebook sent me, because yesterday I posted something about me talking to you, and somebody said that I think last time you ran, you had mentioned you were going to donate your salary.
I've been donating my salary since I got on this board.
So just Heather White, just so you know, I asked him the question, and he's been donating his salary.
I donate to so many personal things. I have paid so many power bills when people were going to be disconnected. It's pathetic, in the tens of thousands of dollars. Mm-hmm. Because when I was a kid, my dad had gone bankrupt. I was 16. I was washing dishes at Denny's at night, and the IID pulled up to our house to disconnect our power. And when he was putting on his climbing spikes, I walked up to him and I said, I think I know what you're here for, and if you do that, it's an all-electric house. We're going to lose what little we have. He put his equipment back in his bucket, turned around, got about halfway across the yard, and he said, and in the most mournful voice, he said, "You got to know if you don't pay this, they're going to make me come back." I thought, God, he was sorrier than I was. Anyway, I got my check. I gave it to my mother. I said, "Go pay that power bill." And she did. I don't know that man could ever have known what that one act of compassion was going to do. I have paid tens of thousands of dollars for people facing cutoff. The last one was about a month ago, maybe a month and a half ago, in La Quinta. They can't vote. It wasn't political. Mm-hmm. Called me. She had a problem. It was $400. Okay, I paid it. But she got through the holidays and didn't have her power shut off. Yeah. And I have done that ever since I've been on this board, and I will continue to do it. I'm not doing this for the money. I'm doing it for the people I serve, and I will continue to do that. That's just the tip of the iceberg, my friend. I have paid for funerals. I have paid for surgeries. I have paid for cars for people who couldn't get to work, so I bought them cars so they could get to work to make a living. Mm-hmm. And not one, not two. If I bought one car, I bet I bought 50, and I give them away because I care for the people I serve. And if you're less fortunate than others and you need the help, I have given it.
Well, thank you so much. I'm sure people out there that you've helped really appreciate it, and thankful for what you've done for them. And I'm thankful for you to, spend this time with me and talking about, things you've done for the county and for the people of the Imperial Valley and the employees at the IID, and yeah, I mean, I don't know if anything else that you want to.
No, I'm not going to sit here and toot my own horn. I just, there are things I do, and I do them discreetly, and I do them quietly, and I don't take a lot of credit for it.
Yeah.
I will say that somehow, somewhere in 2004, some of it got out, and I was asked to be at the Martin Luther King award ceremony in the old post office, and I was awarded the Martin Luther King Image Award for Imperial County for 2004.
Yeah, I heard that. All right. Thank you so much for taking the time. I want to remind everybody that this is not an endorsement. That if you're a candidate and if you want to be on the podcast, let me know, and I'm glad to have you on. And if you want to follow Mr. Kuhn's race for the ID Division 2, I'm sure you can follow it on Facebook. I think you have a Facebook page.
We do.
Look him up on Facebook, and you can follow the race, his campaign. And yeah, thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace.